Welcome back to an expanded edition of Dateline New Haven and WNHH-FM, your home for community radio. 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhaveninternet.org and on TuneIn Radio. Welcome to our TuneIn listeners. I believe that's the fastest growing segment of our listenership, though that's completely unscientific. I'm Paul Bass, your host, looking at what makes New Haven tick. And one of our favorite guests, and sometimes host in his own right, is in the studio with us, Doug Hausladen. We call him the city traffic czar because he's unfortunate to have succeeded someone who was known as a czar in the way he cracked down on the parking, and was proud of that.
We've learned a lot since the days of yore, and I'll be honest that people still love to call me that title, even though I try to be a lot more collaborative. And
you don't stand when someone's getting towed and say, "Ha, we were going to get you."
No,
I hope you get more tickets. And I love Brian McGrath, who was known as the czar, because he gave us a lot of good articles.
Well, I'll tell you, Brian also increased collection rates and knows a lot from his redevelopment days, too.
As does Doug Howland, knows a lot about the things that New Haven independent readers care so much about, which is transportation. And Doug has so many. He's the City of New Haven's traffic and parking director, transit director. They've changed that name.
Transportation, traffic, and parking director.
Why don't they just call you transit director?
Well, we don't actually run the transit system. Well, until now that we have a bike share system. So
that's right, which we're going to get to.
Finally, we got some transit.
And also, Doug has two hats. The other is that he's the head of the New Haven Parking Authority. You might say, why is that separate? Because it is a separate authority, tell me if I have this right, which is bonded on its own, has its own legal, although it's appointed, parts of it appointed by the mayor. It has a responsibility for managing our parking garages and parking lots.
That's correct, and it's authorized under state statute as well as municipal code, and both authorizations give us immense powers that are very gladly checked by a board that's a very active working board at the Parking Authority. We do have eminent domain, for instance.
Wow.
Like other transit districts or the City of New Haven.
So you're going to grab someone's property?
No, sir.
Why not?
We have the power. Like everybody talks about, we have a tool belt, and we obviously like to manage parking with people, and so it's easier to work with collaboratively rather than take their land. But the transit district is another service that I'm a member of.
It's like My Ride and stuff.
That's right, and I'm the
state agency,
vice president. It's a regional agency, I would say, that has a board of directors. So Greater New Haven Transit District, I serve as the vice president presently.
But the other two jobs used to have separate full salaries.
Correct.
Bill Kilpatrick did a great job running it for months,
Correct.
For years. People didn't realize that the Park Authority ran a surplus. There was some part of government that had extra money to invest. Are you still running a surplus?
We have a cash on hand for projects that are already slated and designed. We have a bit of a deficit at the moment with respect to fully funding our anticipated construction projects.
What's the reason?
The reason are the fact that the last generation of leaders in the City of New Haven realized that there was a surplus, and they took all of the cash on hand about eight years ago.
We shouldn't have reported that surplus.
Hey, if it's your fault, not mine, that's great. I think the only fault that is to blame is the not fully funding pilot.
Okay, let's do a little. Doug Hausladen, I'd like to do an update today on transportation and transit.
That's great. I'd love to, yeah.
Okay, because you got a lot going on. For instance, bike share. You've been in charge, point person, for having New Haven do what New York does on a much, much smaller scale, which is have a bike share program. And that means you can sign up per ride, right, or per year.
Yep. Or month.
And you go to one of what are now 20 stations in town?
I believe we're up to about 20. I think it's like 19, but yeah.
And you can just pick the bike there and take it to another station and leave it. And I would look up bike share in the Independent under 2 words and look at Tom Breen's article about how he learned to love bike share. He learned that there's some tricks you need to find to make it work right. The rollout happened about a month or 2 ago?
That's right. We're still in a soft launch period. We have not the company has not fully deployed all 30 stations or 300 bikes yet. The next 100 bikes should be coming out this week or next.
So how much are people using them?
So far, so good. You know, every month we get a report, and in the March report, they were used 1,400 times for 100 bikes. And
out of how many bikes?
100 bikes. And so the challenge right now with respect to how well is it being utilized is that without full deployment, we're not going to see how useful of a service this is without full deployment. So if you only have 10 stations, right, you can only go to 10 places. As we grow, the provider has already acknowledged that they have seen the interest in bike share. They've actually purchased 400 bikes and are ready to deploy 400.
How many have they deployed so far?
Only 100, and the next 100 are coming out this week or next.
So So far, after 1 month, 100 bikes used 1,400 times. Too early to tell because the point is to kind of
Right.
get the bugs out.
Right.
Because ultimately we have 400 bikes and 30 stations. Originally, the first group was not going to include New Hallville because that's out of the inner ring of the city. I don't mean like inner suburbs. I mean if you go concentrically from the green.
Yes.
And
This is
political pressure, democracy at work. The elected representative said need New Hallville, so you put it there. And you do not have Westville. I live in Westville, so I'm a little selfish there, and I do
Understood.
have my own bike. My question is, did you leave out the most promising neighborhood? Because my observation could be wrong, is that Westville, after East Rock, has the most bike riders, but East Rock, you can walk downtown. So on the one hand, does that mean a lot of people in Westville have bikes, so they wouldn't need bike share? Or did you kind of shortchange the most promising market?
That's a great question, and we use the bottom-up approach to help plan the first 30 stations. Our goal is to not stop after the first deployment. As a city, our goal is, to triple the amount of bikes that we have in this contract by being successful and by growing on a system to make sure that it's remains successful. There's a big debate on whether or not you do coverage or density when it comes to station selection.
Meaning how far out you go, or
That's
how
right.
many options you give within a smaller area.
That's right. And we have a very similar conversation with bus stops, right? Do you want them a quarter mile apart or an eighth of
Those
a
are
mile
my
apart?
favorite ones, yeah.
And sometimes by having them too far apart, you break the system and make it unuseful. And so the big question with respect to Westville is, New Hallville, the inner core has once you cross over Edgewood Park, the density reduces a little bit, as well as the number of business locations
Going west.
reduces a little bit. But what we're really supportive of is the private sector helping out. There is ways to sponsor bike share stations. So to my understanding, there's a conversation with the district happening in
That's the new development in Fairhaven at James and State.
ironically an old transfer station
Right,
for the
buses.
transit
So the
system.
conversation being on top of
On
the
top
400
of.
bikes and 30 stations, you're looking for other people to sponsor. And, of course, the district's developer, David Salinas, was one of the biggest promoters of bike share.
That's right. He loves it. In fact, he shout out to David for commuting in from Milford every once in a while and really documenting his commute right after the Long Wharf. I remember a Snapchat from him or an Instagram or whatever it was right after Long Wharf Drive opened up, where he got to the New Haven border, was concerned, and then.
So Mark Abraham writes in on Facebook, thanks for the updates. And I believe Janet Koch and others had weighed in for some reason when the page got refreshed. I can't see their names anymore, but thanks everybody for listening, because we're talking to Doug Hausladen at Dateline New Haven for transportation and transit updates. What I learned today on the show is when we talk about transit, we're talking about transit systems like bus systems and train systems. And oh wow, says Janet Ellen Koch. Thank you, Janet Ellen Koch. And Kate Rosen, who says love. And Janet Koch was a great City Hall reporter at the old New Haven Journal Courier. And when I was
That
in
is before my
college,
time.
I used to look up to her because I used to sometimes go in there and write articles as a college student. And then she became a City Hall reporter for the New Haven Register when those two papers merged.
I have a great respect for anybody on the City Hall beat. It is a tough one.
She was great at it, and she also had a weekly column where she navigated that line so well, where you were somewhat opinionated and analytical, but you weren't like taking sides in ideological or party fights. So it actually good column writing that illuminated the daily news reporting.
That topic is a topic I'm sure you're not immune to with respect to your editorial.
Right, fairness. You try to be fair. You don't pretend you don't have a thought in your head.
Yeah.
You try to explain stuff to people, and it means you have to admit you're a person who draws conclusions, but you can honestly, in your heart, believe you're not trying to make a side win or being a journalist to try to convince people to be liberal or conservative.
And I'll tell you, without the editorial umbrella of Paul Bass, if you will, you're not going to have enough history with a topic to necessarily be able to explain it fully.
And Janet had that history. That's one
There you
reason
go.
her column was so
Thank
good.
you for listening, Janet.
Yeah, and she still
Please
listens.
write in
She
any
lives in the
questions.
Hartford area now, and she listens in. But let's bring it back to bikes.
Yeah.
So my favorite part of bike share, and I plead guilty to this, is we had this great bike share program that the entire city was clamoring for. And then once we get it, was the independent right? Nah, hooray, we finally got the bike share. Although Tom
McDonald's.
Breen did a great in-depth article about how to use it, so let's take credit for that.
Yep.
We wrote about the thing a few people got upset about,
Well, hey,
which was an only a New Haven thing, which we thought was a legitimate issue, which is to pay for it. Now, we don't have much money in the city. We're raising taxes. We
Right.
can't tax our property, getting state cutbacks, can't tax 54% of our exempt property.
Right.
So we found someone to pay for it.
right, trade-offs.
And they have to then put ads up to pay for it.
Right.
Which is interesting that the ads still work. And because in newspapers, they don't, in print newspapers. And what they got was McDonald's ads. And in New Haven, we have higher expectations for what our culture will be like. And we wish no one ever drove a car. So sometimes we have these long debates that even though I don't like to drive a car, I think get ridiculous, like try to develop in a way that no one will ever ride a car and park. But we know we have less parking than we used to. We need less, and it's working.
I think the heart of these arguments are exactly where the values of New Haven are.
And also how much we can agree what the values are, and then we disagree about how much we can make our world conform to them and how much we can push the needle. And you definitely can push the needle, but sometimes you shoot yourself in the foot if you don't get it. So in this case, should we not have had bike share at all? Or should we let them put ads up for McDonald's and say we want to promote a more healthful lifestyle? So there you go to Hill House High School. You say jump on this bike, but also while 1,000 kids are going to class, or almost 1,000, they're looking every day at these huge Big Macs, staring them in the face and saying, "Go buy one." What do you think?
I think a lot of things. I have worked at the Yale School of Public Health. I was the
right. So the objection was you guys let this really counterproductive ad marketing campaign take
I think it's
place.
a fair critique. This city is working with trade-offs. Every minute of our waking hour is a conversation about trade-offs. Whether or not you pay for X or pay for Y with limited budgets. And again, the fault is really to blame on the lack of pilot funding over the last generation.
That's payments in lieu of taxes from the state that promised to
I think
reimburse us for taxes and property.
I think everybody understands that if we actually had been given our fair share by legislative mandate, we would be in a much better place. And kudos to the mayor for fighting for our fair share in Hartford. With these trade-offs come in place, it is uncomfortable and it is tough. And that's why I'm very proud of the process that was followed. There is this is not czar. This is not my world. I am not the czar, even though people like to call me that.
You are the traffic czar, transit czar.
I am the director of transportation, traffic, and parking. And in that role, I present things to a publicly accountable.
But also, you work for a mayor says we want bike share, and you work for a mayor says we don't have any more money. So what
Absolutely.
do you do?
So what do you do? And every document we have in our hands, from every planning document, every public participation document, comprehensive plan of development, our climate sustainability framework, as well as the transformation plan, all of these point to easier access to bikes. It's these trade-offs are extremely complicated.
So you're saying the good that comes from having bike share outweighs having another venue for McDonald's to advertise. And McDonald's, again, isn't guns. It isn't liquor. And I mean, we face this when I used to run a for-profit newspaper. Where do you draw the line? You're going to take some ads of things that aren't your perfect world because you'll never stay in business, and there's a First Amendment and all that kind of stuff. And although you don't have to press the ads, but then there's certain kinds that you don't want to be a vehicle for harming your community. Mm-hmm. So where do you draw the line in bike share ads?
Well, the contractor has policies in place with respect to the provisions in their contract.
So now we answer the question: like, what kind of ads will we take on? Won't we?
I believe firearms are not allowed, and so the silver bullet is allowed.
The what?
The silver bullet that's a bad joke, I guess, because Coors Light was allowed.
Coors Light, yeah.
And so, to my understanding, we've had a conversation in the public realm with respect to what is appropriate signage and what is appropriate advertisement in the public right-of-way. I believe the Food Policy Council had recently, in the last 5 years, put forth a measure to limit advertising in the public right-of-way. That measure has failed. We've had those conversations as a public. I understand that some folks think that the process in the public is very complicated and doesn't invite real dialogue. Some people are frustrated by that process. However, we've had the public process with respect to those ads.
Well, without weighing in, I would say we do more debate here than you can imagine.
Debate is great.
I love the debate on the Independent site about this. We did 4 articles and polls.
If you ever hear me say I don't read the comments, I'd be lying. I do not respond to them, but I do listen to them and read them. I read every article. There's always a signal in the noise, no matter what the
always something constructive in debate.
I always something to be learned from.
So now,
every comment.
will there be, when we have all 30 bike share stations, will there be one in Westville?
I don't believe yet.
Even when they're 30?
I don't believe yet.
Now, why wouldn't you want one? Now, you're about to build a bike lane in Westville. Why wouldn't you want bike share?
Absolutely think that we need to expand. And the first 30 stations just did not cross the Edgewood Park.
But they did cross into New Hallville, which we're glad they did.
Which is the density demands it in New Hallville, as well as the access to the Farmington Canal Line as it stands right now.
Mm.
Also, the legislative requirement of being in New Hallville. And so when the process from a bottom-up perspective, we had hundreds and hundreds of feedback information on where people felt that bike share could help expand their daily tasks.
And were you not hearing it from Westville? Is that because everyone has a bike already?
No, we did. We did hear it from Westville. However, unfortunately, the public participation was not the only data point. There were other data points like density to the entire system. And so the stations started effectively near our train stations and bus hub. Those three focal
right, where it
points.
made most sense for that last mile. We always
That's
hear
right.
about that last commuting mile.
And I'll tell you, if you talk to the New Haven bike share mechanics, I've heard a comment which is like, I know you guys said that this was going to be a transit expansion, but really we should talk about the, going out to Lighthouse or something like that. And, you're really focusing on the transit expansion. I'm like, yes, we are.
All right. And we got a bunch of comments here. And you're listening to Dateline New Haven with Doug Hausladen. One of the person we know that anytime we write that name in the independent, people are going to really be interested in what we're writing about. And Inner City Connecticut says, can you do something about the long, long, long lights all over the place? Why can't we have small lights that adjust to the traffic flow? I feel like all I do is drive light to light.
So first of all, thank you for the comment. Absolutely, we have been improving some of our corridors. Some of our, so George Street, State Street, Whaley Ave has seen corridor timing improvements. We have 3 more corridors planned in what's called the Unified Public Work Program, the UPWP, at our COG, our SCROG, the South Central Regional Council of Government. So state study
Kind
money.
of an unfortunate acronym.
So the state DOT funds our county, effectively, our COG, who then turns out, and we're going to have more corridors studying for timing purposes. But the big challenge with respect to the timing of corridors is twofold. One, we still have some traffic signals that are controlled by controllers that are older than I am. I was born in the early 80s, and so we have very little connectivity to some of our traffic signals.
Are we talking more about like Dixwell, Whaley, kind of the main thoroughfares?
There are 2 or 3 traffic signals on Whaley Avenue that are not connected to the central hub.
Yeah.
And so we don't have power to connect them. But the major problem, especially in our downtown, is this notion of concurrent phase crossing or all walk phases. So when you push a button for the pedestrian crossing, Church Street goes, Elm Street goes, all the pedestrians go. That actually leads to a really challenging timing coordination problem, and it also leads to bad behavior, if you haven't noticed that as well. So you get a lot of pedestrians that don't want to wait, so they end up jaywalking. You get a lot of people that don't want to wait, so they turn right on red, opposing the jaywalkers, and you get jaywalkers that are coming through on the Church Street signal and people that are trying to turn, and it creates a mess. There's a policy, and New York DOT has provision spearheaded this, something called a leading pedestrian interval and concurrent phase walking. So leading pedestrian interval means, and let me do concurrent phase. So concurrent phase means when there's a green ball, so that when the driver has a green light, the pedestrian has a green light as well. So you work in parallels like New York. And then the leading pedestrian interval means that the pedestrian goes first. So they get out in the intersection for 2 or 3 seconds. They can cross safely to a point where there's not going to be a conflict, and then the cars turn behind them. So we had a couple of items on our CSEP agenda on Thursday night, City Services Environmental Policy Committee, the Board of Alders. And one of them was this project 92666, which is a large traffic signal improvement program for the downtown. 8 new traffic signals are coming, federally funded through CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Funds.
Well, you know those acronyms, though.
I'm getting really sorry. So those traffic signals in the downtown were going to be replaced. Shovels will be in the ground this fall.
All right.
And once we have that
so
communication,
8 traffic signals downtown.
We'll be able to switch them to concurrent phase crossing and make a policy change as a city to make that happen.
So let me go back to say what this all means. So there are going to be 2 new traffic signals installed this summer, you said?
8 new traffic signals with construction beginning in the fall in the downtown, 92666.
And these are going to replace ones that exist now.
That's correct. So
and that's going to connect them to
our central server, as well as allow for upgrades in timing that are more dynamic and more responsive right now without fiber connection.
And Inner City writes in Munson Dixwell, oh my God.
Munson Dixwell, oh my God. I'll be out there. And on the Henry Triangle as well. I'm not familiar with the traffic signal timing, but I'm out there on,
and
I
we
believe,
just approved, we're
Monday
getting
morning, I think.
going through the process of approving big new development right at that juncture, the old Joe Greats.
That's right.
And Inner City also writes, I kind of like that a black neighborhood got something a white neighborhood hasn't gotten yet, which is kind of true.
Which is?
Well, she's talking about how like New Harville got the bike share and Westfield ain't yet.
Oh, yeah.
That is fair.
No, it's great.
We got it. We shouldn't always just go to the ones that get the most people out to the meeting.
That's right. No, and the bike lane is not yet built, so,
and we're going to get to that after the break. As a matter of fact, Just going to break to say we're talking to Doug Hausladen.
On what radio station?
WNHH 103.5 FM.
Where is it?
Live on Elm Street, New Haven.
Okay. Also online, where can I find it?
www.newhavenindependent.org.
What about those social media channels and those?
Facebook Live. You can watch and send in
Okay.
questions people are doing. And also, Doug, tune in radio. I'm noticing more and more people using, including me.
That's interesting. I actually listen to it on SoundCloud a lot.
Yeah. SoundCloud's a good place to get it. Not that many people listen on SoundCloud.
I like it on when I get it through my my podcast, so I can listen to it on 1.5 times speed.
Which is smart. Yep.
Save
and
time,
also
efficiency.
It doesn't always load as well. TuneIn really works. Except they don't give you the write-up on podcasts you listen to.
I wonder if, because TuneIn has there's Sonos. Have you heard of Sonos?
Mm-mm.
It's a speaker company that has a networked speaker company for your home entertainment system. And you can say things like, Sonos, do this for me. And TuneIn Radio supports Sonos. I wonder if more people aren't, because of this fancy speaker thing.
Yeah, that's where we're going, voice recognition. Mark Abraham writes in, 1, love the new cycle track around Water Street in the harbor. When will there be protected cycle streets around downtown, which is the highest density destination, such as Church, Elm, and George?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if Harry Droz is listening, if he could let me see the rest of that comment. Harry, you still
So
there?
let's start there.
Protected cycle tracks are when you have a bike lane that has a physical barrier built there that keeps you separate from the cars, which we've all believed really what works. Sharrows doesn't work, just painted bike lanes. Oh, and he also says, when will the Edgewood cycle track be completed, which we talked about earlier. So Westville did make the noise, because we have so many commuters, about getting a protected bike cycle track. He did a great job with Giovanni Zinn, the engineer, of negotiating with neighbors, the few who didn't want it, so that their concerns were addressed. And you got state money for the first two-way protected cycle track in Connecticut going from Forest Road into downtown.
I would say the first one is Long Wharf Drive.
Okay.
But I think this might be the second one.
And so Mark Abraham wants to know when they're going to be some downtown and when you're going to start building that Edgewood one.
So Edgewood is being packaged and out to bid. There's something called the Office of State Traffic Administration, OSTA. It used to be called STC for anybody who's really wonky. And OSTA has permitting and purview over traffic signals. Proud of the work.
What's that called again?
OSTA, Office of State Traffic Administration. I'm extremely proud of the work that Raj Mathur and Giovanni Zinn and Bijan Notke and Bruce Fisher, Chris Flanagan, Don Henning, Zach up in the engineering room. We've put forth the work. OSTA had never seen this before. It took a lot of comments.
And what do they have to approve?
They have to approve the work on the traffic signals in general. So any major changes to traffic signals has to be approved by this Office of State Traffic Administration. Is
everything else approved? We got the city approvals, state money. How much is it going to cost?
1.2 is the money allocated by the state of Connecticut, and the final approval is at the permitting office of the local district. So we're awaiting our permit for construction, and
from whom?
From the District 3 at the Connecticut DOT.
And so District 3 DOT needs to give you a permit final approval.
Yeah. So we worked out with OSTA to make sure that the traffic signals were not going to be a problem. And then we come down to the district and say, can we get a permit to do this work?
So has OSTA said yes?
They have. Yeah.
When?
About a month and a half, 2 months ago, but not too long ago.
Is this the last step now, the state?
This is a form. This is a... this is just a matter of form.
Because the same individuals already told us to go build this.
That's right. And once we go out to bid, then the people who win the bid will be able to go and get their permit. We're prepping and briefing the district office to make sure.
So they have to approve a permit process.
That's correct. So to work in the right of way. Once we have a contractor, they will. We're working with the district to make sure that they're all okay with the project ahead of the permitting. So it goes like this.
So while you're waiting for that approval, you've put a request out for someone to build it. So
Giovanni and our city engineer is packaging that up. It's going to be one contract, and that contract will have a couple of subcontracts, one being striping, one being the civil engineering, one being the traffic.
And when's that going out?
I believe it should be out by July, possibly June. I will...
and then after you pick, when would you pick someone?
Right. So the normal bid process, about 6 weeks. So we're anticipating being in the ground in August.
Oh, that would go that fast.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The rest is pro forma and things that our engineering department does exceptionally well, packaging bids and working with our SBIs.
Mark also asks, can the state economic competitiveness program help make these things happen more quickly? Other cities are building thousands of miles of these.
Absolutely.
Thousands, but
no, some of them is. Chicago is like 500. I mean, it's crazy how many the dedication.
And what people don't know is that you actually led bike riders up to the Capitol to change state law. Part of how you got this years-long process going of making a bike lane, protect bike lane, was to get the state to change its law to allow it, which is kind of interesting to see a city official doing.
That was new news in 2014 when Mayor Harp asked me to take the job.
People don't remember that we changed state law, which isn't easy to do, so that we could build it, and then it takes years to actually build it, negotiate with each property owner, so that there's a store owner who wanted to make sure her customers could still park, and now you're just trying to get over that last line.
I'll tell you that
years.
I will pop a bottle of something, champagne most likely, when we cut a ribbon on this thing. It will be.
Do you like champagne?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah. I don't like champagne. Okay. So,
like most alcoholic or adult beverages, I like good things. So,
okay, moving on from bikes, Doug Hausladen, to buses and trains.
Yes,
Two
definitely.
questions you've dealt with, which you don't have power over, is how much the state charges us to ride a bus and a train, and the new train service that's going to go from New Haven to Springfield. So I'm excited about it. Wish it went to Northampton more, but now we had some criticism. Sandy Johnson wrote, say this overall good thing. We've wanted it for years, but the hours are kind of weird. It's not really going to work for people to take in the morning and get to work on time to Hartford. Is that true? And if so, have you done anything about that?
That's exactly what it's looking like. So the initial timetables came out not too long ago. They have already been edited once. The present times that folks could get to a job in Hartford would be 7:31 arrival or 8:56 arrival. Neither of which is really that optimal unless you're working in a shift that starts at 8 a.m. So the negative side is that the morning peak traffic, so like the morning rush when you're going to work, there's not a lot of trains moving north. There are a lot so that's not great for our residential population, and something we've already supplied feedback on, and we're the next round of timetables will come out in September, and we anticipate to be able to sneak a few more trains, probably one or two over the morning. Well, it's not my trains, and they're focusing right now on launch. So I won't promise what the DOT can be able to do. And
so you're hoping to influence the September timetables.
That's right. Yeah, and
why did they spend all this money doing this if you can't ride the train to work?
Yeah, so I brought this exactly up, which was Mayor Harp's big focus for her Department of Transportation is connect access to jobs, access to life. And there's and Mark, can you tell us how many high-paying jobs are in the Hartford region? There are more than in the New Haven region. And so opening up access to those Hartford jobs is something that's paramount to the ability for us to compete as a region, to start thinking ourselves as South Hartford, and Hartford think of us as North New Haven. So now that we're connected by a rail line that's going to have 17 trains a day. But right now, the good news for New Haven employers is that there are a lot of trains arriving in New Haven in the morning for a lot of opportunity for employees to come to New Haven and work. And when I broached this with the state of Connecticut, the initial comment was,
because they only care about Hartford. They care about people in Hartford. The Department of Transportation could really give a damn about New Haven. We've asked them for decent bus service for years. They spent 4 years trying to give us GPS on buses, and they still don't work.
I'm excited that the Move New Haven study is moving along, and phase 2 has started, and we just finished our
So you
our
said it'll be
there,
good.
but
So this new train service will be good for employers who have people coming from
absolutely.
Hartford.
And the
going
big
into work
focus
isn't
was
gonna work.
accessing the New York markets was their initial focus. And so our feedback has been that New York is a very powerful market. However, the high-paying jobs that are in Hartford are really important
and then for entertainment,
our
people
population.
say the last train is too early to go to concerts in Hartford. Is that a big train population?
I think it could be. I really do think it
The
could be,
Meadows,
should be.
yeah.
I mean, I've loved taking the train down to the Bridgeport Bluefish. May they rest in
did that?
peace. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You're a Bluefish fan.
I was. I don't know where they are these
baseball,
days.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for an event.
Yeah.
Events
fun.
are
You
fun.
like being around
I
people.
love being outside around people. It's great.
And
Third
what-
baseline had a hot tub. That was great.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great fun.
So the trains are starting. It's going to be a good thing, but it's not optimal for what about the airport? What about taking a train? Is it ever going to be easy to go to Bradley?
So initially, there will still be connections. They did not relocate the train lines to go to Bradley. However, there's going to be great dedicated bus service, to my understanding, from the Windsor Lock Station, a direct shot. The other aspect.
When will that be around? Like, how often will you get that?
That's a great question. I can get back to you. We're focused on launch right now. Being the acting
So you
executive
will be
director
able
of
to
the
take
parking
it to
authority.
Windsor Locks.
Yes, unless that's on, that might be a station that's on hold at the moment, with respect to the special transportation fund. which was the initial part of your question, which was respect
That's up in the air.
how do you fight back, or what do you do with respect to the cuts that are coming and whatnot?
And Doug got a shout out from Inner City. Doug's a good hype man. Ha ha ha. Meaning that you hype this up well. And then the other issue with trains and buses is the fares. They're going up. I know you spoke out against that.
Absolutely speaking out against this. A lot of our fares are scheduled to go up. The bankrupting of the Special Transportation Fund is something that our General Assembly has to take up right away.
Are you going to go for a lockbox? We talked about this with Mayor Harper. Are you going to be for a lockbox?
I work at the pleasure of the mayor, and whatever the mayor wants to go for, I'm for. Did she respond in the last hour?
She doesn't yet have a position.
I think what she does have a position on is making sure there's funding.
The question is the best way to have it be a lockbox or not, so you don't have to weigh in on that one.
Yeah. But right now the DOT has pushed off $4.3 billion of projects, some of which are, put offable, some of which are mandatory.
Okay, now you got your armor, Doug Hausladen? You ready for one of those things that everyone hates you for no matter what you do?
Oh, thank you. I'm ready. Thank you for prepping. Yep.
How dare you give parking tickets when people park longer than they paid for?
Well, I know that that on-street surface parking is a limited common good that must be equitably distributed with price controls. For all of us public radio listeners, really appreciate that bit of social policy.
You've made it easy to pay the ticket. You're not trying to you're not trying to lure people not paying the ticket. You now can use your phone, although I can't, but most people can, especially not my age. And if you're at a restaurant, you can go on the app and refill the meter and all that kind of thing. But you have raised the as of July 1st on the new budget, assuming it passes,
parking ticket
$5 more for basic parking ticket. What was it before? 25?
20, and now it'll be 25.
Okay.
It's a good time out to say that when you come down to City Hall on May 9th and 10th to witness and participate in the public hearing and deliberations and vote, don't forget that there's democracy parking. We have made available at 32 Elm Street.
32 Elm is a lot at Elm near Orange.
That's right.
Past Orange as you drive.
Parking Authority, has.
Are people using it? Do they know about it?
We're getting the word out, and I think more that we talk about.
So if you're coming to a meeting at night,
that's
you
right.
could park there. And
if you're coming to a public meeting happening at City Hall or Hall of Records.
How do you physically get the benefit?
So you'll park in the gated lot at 32 Elm Street. It's called the Orange and Elm lot. You'll pull a ticket. You'll take that ticket inside to the security guard. Security guard will give you a validation. And so the security guard will mark down what meeting you're going to. We made the hurdles just a little high, not too high. You just have to come in, say what meeting you're going to. The security guards give you the validations. And then when you're going to exit, you put in your ticket, the validated ticket, and it's $0.
All right, Mark Abraham has responded to you. Mark Abraham from Data Haven. Thank you, Mark, for the data. Hartford has about 120,000 higher wage jobs located within 4 miles of its train station. Well, 4 miles, that's another leg.
Well,
New Haven
that's
has
like
about 70,000.
Yeah.
That's a lot fewer. Net gain of workers each day, about municipality, 70,000. Hartford, New Haven, 40,000. Stanford, 20,000. What does that mean, net gain of workers each day?
It's every day your population, your daytime population versus your evening population. Okay. So Bridgeport is the largest city in Connecticut, but except for 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday.
And then people, so that's net, so that includes the people who go out and the ones who come in. That's very interesting
inflows and outflows.
Data, Mark Abraham. Thanks so much for participating here on Dateline New Haven with Doug Hausladen from City Traffic and Transit is on
WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven.
All right, thank you for that reset. Other parking news is you're pushing a new concept that is very interesting called performance-based parking. I love that's called performance. It makes it kind of like
should we call it market parking?
Well, performance-based sounds like they're taking
How about
steroids and they're working at the gym and getting their parking abs going. But what it means is you're trying to make the parking system kind of change how much you pay and how long you could park at each spot based on how many people want to park there, because you want a goal of always having 85%
the magic ratio
of spots filled. That if 85% of spots filled, that means people who want to park on the street instead of a garage will find a spot.
Right.
But that enough spots are being filled so that we're making our money on them.
That's right.
And then the other thing you do is you partly try to affect that by how long you could park in each spot, where the demand's highest, and how much you pay. Correct?
That's right. And the biggest challenge with these systems is how do you tell people about it? The signage, from the reporting to how do you convince a traffic authority to give you the powers, to all of this trust that you have to build in the system. I think that what us in the parking industry know is that the on-street parking in front of a retail store is the most valuable real estate in your city of New Haven. if you talk to some urban planners, it generates about $250,000 of sales at a retail establishment annually. Every parking space is in front. And so you get these very heartfelt, passionate fights over the public right-of-way and the best and optimal use for it. You hear a lot of highest and best use when it comes to urban planning. You also have to account when you're worrying about highest and best use, you don't want it to just go to, say, lawyers that are going to court who can bill their clients for all of these parking fees.
Well, then we'll take that money.
We love that money. That's why we make it very easy to bill your assistant and stuff through Park Mobile emails and Go New Haven emails. But folks have to come downtown. We got to go in to do business at City Hall. So, allowing someone to park for 6 hours in front of City Hall all day is not optimal. You need to have that churn to make sure that folks can do business. It's not easy. We only have, there's about 20,000 garage parking spaces in downtown. And there's about 1,200 on-street spaces.
There are 20,000 garage spaces?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
But I never, I was going downtown Saturday night. I just don't like to park in the garage.
We all know why. I hope you don't say it out loud, but we all know why Connecticut or New Haven region does not go into garages.
But there are a couple of reasons besides those ones we don't have to mention on this show.
Thank you.
It's also just convenience. You like to park on the street.
Well,
it's even psychological. You think it's more convenient whether or not it is.
I'll tell you, we had a very notable New Haven partner come through the last few weekends and was frustrated by the Onstreet situation. They had a user error on Park Mobile, and they got a parking ticket, and they're appealing. And then the next week decided to use a garage and got, when 1,000 people were let out of Schubert Theater at the same time, they had trouble getting out of Temple Street Garage. This is one of those great Yogi Berra problems of nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded. At the same time,
but we do want to have a crowded city. We want
exactly.
City.
No,
and we want to make it possible
at the same
not
time,
to drive.
You should be able to get out of the Temple Street Garage faster, and we're working on
I've been caught on that when the show lets
it's
out.
real. It's real, and you can.
How are you working on that?
License plate recognition.
What do you mean? Have a third lane for that?
So at Union Station, at say Elm and Orange, or you prepay for your parking. So you pay at the station at Union Station, then you go up, and then when you go out, you have a validated ticket that gets you out a little faster. Mm-hmm. The amount of capital.
But how do you know how long you've paid, or do you give a credit card so it could be fungible?
No, you pull a ticket in the beginning. Then when you come back from Union Station, you put the ticket in, you pay with your credit card, and then you got like a 15-minute window to get out.
But then it can take more than 15 minutes to get out.
That happens very rarely, and you have a security guard on hand that handles the transaction that way. But there are other systems which, we're...
So that's license plated then. Is that a third lane? Are you going to be able to build a third lane?
Well, you can add it to... We've seen, depending on whom responds to the bids over at the Parking Authority. So, we're in the middle of an RFP process at the moment.
Do? You have an RFP for this?
Yep.
For the Temple Street Garage?
Not specifically, but for something more generally of central permit management system and smart parking systems like LPR.
So you have a smart parking RFP that, among other things, will try to address the rush
That's right.
at Temple Street Garage.
Assuming we have
pay and then have it recognize your license plate.
That's right.
What?
And
again,
so that would...
Do you have to build another lane there?
You would not. You would just add a camera to where the exit is, and then you would have a
people
module
get out faster.
Override the gate arm.
Well, you often have those two lanes. You're going to say one lane is for that and the other is not?
No, I think either lane will work. I think one of the challenges on the Temple Street Garage exit at MLK is that the far right-hand lane says does not say credit card, and so we've had some signage challenges that we're still working on.
How hard is that to fix?
When you're a public agency to bid and
to say what's on the sign? You have
sometimes,
to bid that?
Sometimes it's part of a
go
family.
There with a crayon and just write credit cards.
So we have short-term and long-term solutions. The short-term solution has been a sandwich board. There are longer-term solutions.
All right. Well, Doug Hausladen is talking about solutions at Dateline New Haven. We have just a few more minutes, but we could talk forever about this stuff.
I love
parking. This. Also, how are we doing with this performance-based system? Are we going to actually do it?
That's a great question. So we are submitting to the Board of Alders a letter requesting a public workshop for the summer, like June, right when after the Finance Committee has passed its budget. We'd like to go before whomever the president decides to give us to, but have a public workshop at a Board of Alders committee, as well as, and so we're submitting a letter requesting that. Tomorrow, we will be in our first official conversation with our traffic authority to have this approval at the traffic authority. Effectively, what we're asking for is a 3-year pilot that would allow the director through data-driven analytics to have the ability to change price and time limits in order to reach that, as you mentioned, that 85%.
So would it be part of it's not a budget issue for this year? You looking for money for this?
I'm not. The big challenge is just refreshing the signs and stuff. We have money to refresh the signs already in hand.
Dallas A. Davis writes in on Facebook, "You're doing a great job, Doug. Thanks for the update on the new project, Greatest Small City in America."
Well, thank you, Dallas. I appreciate you.
I hate to be a spoil sport.
Please.
Do these people say we're the greatest small city? Have they all been to every small city in America?
I quote Muhammad Ali, "Don't tell me I'm not the greatest. I'm the double greatest." If we're having a conversation qualifying how great we are, I think we're winning the war.
All right, Dallas, all right, you and your team. And Dallas, thank you so much for writing in to Dateline New Haven. And finally, on parking, we had a State Street lot that was built right across from Goodfellas, right by the highway there. And Goodfellas, and people at the time thought it was kind of favoritism for Goodfellas because there's always idea that they have more influence than they should or something. I don't know if it's an ethnic thing or whatever. But
there's a background. Yeah, it's a little bit of an ethnic thing, but they legitimately had a lease with the state of Connecticut that we legitimately had.
Is that state land?
It is.
So they built a lot there and it was used for their parking, but then they said we don't need it, right? How did that happen?
Yeah. So
why would someone give up something they're getting as a benefit?
Well, the benefit was at a cost. So
they paid
trade-offs
to get
come
that
in.
lot.
That's right. They were in a monthly agreement.
And why did they not need that lot?
They still need the parking. What they were, it was interesting. It was I was driving around. I had remembered I had biked by a street light, so I had forgotten to. I was tired, so I didn't put it in the work order and see click fix. So I came back the next day, put in the work order and see click fix, and decided to pop in and see the Goodfellas team. And I, just hadn't seen them in a while. And I said, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And he goes, "You must have read my mind. Somebody must have told you that I was changing my mind on things. Why are you here?" And I said, "You're my customer. I'm outside fixing your street light. I just wanted to say hi." And he had come, Jerry, the owner of Goodfellas, had recently visited the State Mechanic Street parking lot. State Mechanic is now a metered lot where you've got to pay $1 an hour. And Jerry had been experiencing the parking crunch, which we had told him would happen, which we had predicted would happen, with respect to Cast Iron Chef, as well as the new brewery opening up. So Cast Iron Chef plus Jerry's customers plus Upper State, he was having a hard time managing his lot. In our agreement, we were not to enforce the lot after hours. And so he was having a tough time.
Is that because people from other restaurants were parking in the lot that he had paid to have?
Basically, yeah. Yeah. And so, he came to me and said, "Look, you were right. I'm glad you were right. Let's make this. What other options for management exist?" And so what we have now, we have the approval to move forward on putting gate arms like the Orange and Elm lot, where you can have a validation program. The goal is
so
to have
anyone can park in the lot. It's not a Goodfellas lot, but Goodfellas will just validate your parking.
That's right.
And
other area restaurants would be able to as well. So we have a restaurant program at the Parking Authority where restaurants prepay for evening parking.
If I had a restaurant program, I would want free meals at restaurants.
Hey, free sounds nice.
So some of our readers were concerned, Doug Hausladen, that that's an unsafe lot right by a highway entrance. Any thoughts on that?
I would love, we should, unsafe is a very specific word. I would say that it is an uncontrolled intersection where only the Trumbull Street has a stop control. We collectively need to look at a lot of things. It's a highway entrance, and so the challenges are these highway entrances, and we have sidewalks that cross them.
But you don't necessarily want to put a light up everywhere.
Those are expensive. Lights are $400,000, and then every 10 years, they're another $200,000.
And then on the other side of the highway entrance, where the old Cleaners was, that's going to be a brew pub or something?
That's right.
That's going to change the game, because then people will be walking across that highway entrance. That's not safe.
So we have worked with the brew pub to lease them our other parking lot. That's called the State Audubon lot at night, from 5 p.m. onward.
Is that on the side where they're building the new development project?
Directly across the street. So it's next to the highway, in between William, Grove,
so it's
the railroad tracks. Yeah. So it's next to those condo associations there. So we in trying to divvy up how much parking is there, when we've been working with the State Street merchants, especially Upper State Street, their first challenge to us 4 years ago was get out there, find parking, build parking. We need more parking. So we've built this lot. Now we have this garage, the Granite Square garage, and we've got the Audubon State lot.
That's
Audubon
right, you
lot.
got Granite Square.
So we have all of these lots and garages and trying to get different users
People
in
don't
different
like
spaces.
it. And then in lots, people would rather go on a surface lot than a garage. But Granite Square's always been there and not terribly full, even though we subsidized it in the 90s to be built.
Sure did.
Doug Hausladen, finally, the state legislature is going to decide in the next 24 hours, a little more, maybe 30, whether Tweed, New Haven will get permission to expand the paved runway 1,000 feet and bring more service. Is that going to happen, you think?
I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I'll tell you this. This is the year where I've lived in New Haven longer than anywhere else. And I grew up in Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati. And when I came here to school, I flew Comair Direct. Like once or twice. But, when the pricing wasn't too bad.
Kentucky Derby, you hold one of the big parties in town. How'd it go?
It went well. We got a lot more
horse
coordination. My horse always wins because I bet on the great city of New Haven.
Whoa, what an ending. Doug Hausladen, the traffic and transit chief made for radio. Listener, participant, and host at times on WNHH. Doug, thank you so much for coming in on Monday, taking time out of your busy schedule to tell us about the details, getting into the fine print of so many interesting projects you have. To park in New Haven, to take the bus or the train, to drive around without pulling your hair out.
Mayor Hart moving New Haven forward.
And you just did your requirement of your job to pay credit to the mayor.
All credit to her,
I say, do you guys get trained to say what breakfast cereal had in the morning was thanks to Mayor Harp's wisdom?
Well, I'll tell you.
Because it sounds like communist China. Which I can't imagine her requiring that.
Yeah, I don't know I don't think she requires that. I just give her a lot of credit for giving us the freedom to do what we need to do and to follow the planning that we've been planning for the last 15 years.
Good enough. A lot going on in New Haven. Lots going to be going on. Doug Hausladen, always. Thanks to everyone sending your questions.
Happy Bike Month, everybody.
Oh, that's right. We didn't even talk about Bike Month.
There's so many events. Check them out on newhavenbikemonth.com, Facebook, Twitter, all of the above. A great group of folks that are putting together a lot of events. Was in New Hallville this weekend. Also the downtown events. And coming up is Fairhaven and the Hill.
All right, Doug Hausladen, keeping the trains, the bikes, the cars, and the pedestrian activity rolling in New Haven.
I'll say Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
All right. Thanks for joining us today on Dateline New Haven, WNHH. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Book your flight with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.